Sadie, and I am superintendent-elect at Shickley.
Okay, very good.
I'm Langston Freisen, I'm an assistant principal on
Omaha Public, okay.
Cindy Sharp, elementary principal in Miller.
Miller.
Michelle Rayburn, special education preschool years of 6.
I'm Dave McDowell, I'm the K-12 principal at Pool Junction.
Okay.
Shereen Suri, Director of Curriculum and Instruction, Papillion La Vista.
Okay.
Colin Hacker, 612 principal, your neighbor to the west at Raymond Central.
Raymond Central, okay.
Erica Johnson, I'm at ESU 10, special education coordinator.
Carney, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Lorinda Peterson, elementary principal in Elmore.
I'm Doug Christensen, video coordinator.
Video coordinator, okay. So,
Mixed coordinator.
you guys just hired Jimmy Feeney as an elementary principal, so we hired Jimmy at Boone Central. So he'll do a great job.
We haven't met him yet, but I'm looking forward to meeting him.
He'll do good, so. Well, I appreciate being here today, and hopefully whatever I share is helpful and understandable. So I think those are our questions. I think, you know, the superintendent's ability to maneuver through having a relationship with his board is paramount to how well a district's going to do. You know, my experience have been you have to nurture that relationship. You can't assume it's going to be a good relationship. You have to spend time with board members. If you have opportunities to talk to them, even on a social level, you need to spend time doing that. One of the things, you know, I just transitioned into a new job. I was at Boone Central for 8 years. You get kind of comfortable with your board members, you know, you almost get too comfortable where, well, they understand this, and maybe I don't need to communicate that. And that's really not what you should do. You know, I think if there's any action where they need to know what's going on, you need to send it to them no matter if they care about it or not. You know, I've always taken the stances, I'm gonna over communicate with them until they say I don't need that information. So one of the things though I also know can be very effective is obviously you have to delineate what are your expectations, right? What is the board's expectation of the superintendent? What's the superintendent's expectation of the board members? And so some of that is through conversation, you know, and goal setting. And, you know, what do you expect from me? What is it that I'm going to be evaluated on? I need to know. I don't want to guess at it. I want to know specifically what I'm going to be evaluated on. So I think setting goals, understanding the evaluation process is a big part of that. But the other part is also being able to set your board up to where they have defined roles. And by that, in Waverly, we have committees, right, that we have together. We have 5 committees that every board member is a part of, and almost all of them are a chair of. We have 5, there's 6 board members. We have a planning and development, which is really based around the financial parts of our district, negotiations with teachers, administrators, classified. We have a buildings and grounds committee that meets every month prior to a board meeting where we talk about what's going on in the district with facilities. We have stuff going on every month with facilities. We're finishing off a bond issue and we have summer projects going. We have a policy committee that meets once a month where we sit down and we go through policy updates, both that we know or we have to get in place based off of legislative changes, or at the end of a legislative session there are all new laws and things that districts have to do, and so the attorneys are very good at putting together policies that are updates that we need to do. We have an assessment, kind of an instructional assessment committee where we talk about all things instruction, assessment, and then we have an Americanism committee. So we actually met on an Americanism committee once this year already. I think we have to meet 3 times. So, but those kind of delineate out the day-to-day, the month-to-month responsibilities that we have to get done in our district, and so board members are part of that. Still have to remember too, the superintendent is really the sole employee of a board, right? The board is not in charge of our principals or our staff members. They're in charge of me, right? And so their job is policy, and their job is to hire and fire the superintendent if they have to. And so probably if there's any things in there when it comes to role of governance, it's making sure that we are very clear as to what the board's role is and what my role is. And there are times in which that can get kind of squishy, right? So board members are constantly getting phone calls on things, right? The food is terrible at the high school, or my kid's grade is a B when it should be an A. My kid's not playing enough, you know, he should be starting left tackle on the football team. They have to understand hey, I'm not here to solve all those problems, right? I can direct you to the people that can solve those problems, but I can't sit here and solve your problems. So my experience has been, that is something that we have to be very clear on with our board members about, is know where to direct people, but you're not there to solve their problems, right? We talk about chain of command, we talk about directing them to the correct people. That's probably one of the bigger things a new board member struggles with. I was just telling this group, we had an issue this year where we had some issue with band, and the band director happened to be at the board meeting, and we had a board member kind of jump in the board meeting about how something was handled. And so after the meeting, I sat down with the board and I said, we absolutely cannot do that. You cannot do that in a board meeting. It's not your job, nor is it the appropriate place to do that. But again, new board member, less experienced, veteran board members, I think after a while start to understand, hey, that's not how we handle problems, right? So, I think in this job, if you're successful, I think you have the ability to communicate to the board, but you do it in a way in which everybody understands their roles. The biggest thing that I try to do is to communicate to death with them what's going on in our district. So every week, I send out a weekly update to them. Here are things that happened this week. Here are things this coming week that are coming up, right? They don't get all the details because you possibly couldn't send them all of that information. But anything that's big or anything that I'm involved in, they're gonna get. So that, if I'm out at some meeting and someone says, well, I saw the superintendent out in the meeting, and say, well, yeah, I knew he was there, I knew he was out there. So that's something that I try to do every week. Probably one of the bigger things, personnel is up there, probably one of the bigger things that at times the board has to watch their role is on the personnel issue, right? So they might be getting a phone call, this teacher's ineffective, this teacher is mean to the kids, you hear all these things, right? And again, they have to direct them to the correct people. One of my toughest personnel issues I ever dealt with resulted in going to a teacher hearing, right? Has anybody ever sat in on a teacher hearing or ever watched that? Not fun, not enjoyable, right?
No.
Be better going to the dentist,
Yes,
right?
I would agree.
Kind of a thing. In my old job, we had a situation where when I came into the district, it was one of those teachers that people said, you gotta watch this person, right? We gotta correct us, right? And of course, you inevitably say, well, why didn't the last person correct us, right? Well, you absorb these things just happen and you deal with them. And ultimately, we got to a place with a teacher where they weren't cutting it. We had kids that didn't want to go to their class. And it was in a part of our district, what he was teaching was very impactful to the community, right? So ultimately, we put him on a plan, which led to him kind of thumbing his nose at it, and we went to a termination hearing. Most termination hearings don't occur because the teacher comes to their senses or whatever, and they negotiate out of it, and they're done, and they keep their certificate, and maybe get a semi-nice letter of support. Well, this guy wanted to go to hearing, and 10 minutes into it, Greg Perry just had proven why we were there, and it was over. 10 minutes into it. Now, hearing though, you got to go through all the steps. You got to go through. So we were there 5:30 p.m. I think till 2:30 in the morning, and ultimately it all worked out well. But the fallout of that was, if we were maybe in a Millard or an LPS, that just probably is going to impact a few people, right? This kind of a thing in a district like Boone Central impacts the community. It's on the front page of the paper. Everybody has a connection some way to these people. It's news, right? And so the fallout from that is, it's one thing to go through that hearing, but in our district was, how does this impact our teachers? How does this impact the perceptions from the community? And I think after about a half year, everything was good, and I never got a question out of it since the hearing. But all those personnel issues are the things that as administrators you've probably already dealt with. You realize are the anxiety-inducing, keep you up at night kinds of things. You know, I don't know if I've ever lost sleep over, yeah, what reading program are we gonna choose in elementary, right? Now, for some people, that's anxiety inducing. It's the personnel issues that keep you up at night and make you scratch your head and say a couple extra prayers. And so that was probably one of the tougher issues that I dealt with, and just going through that teaches you a lot. You know, it teaches you a lot about documentation and holding people accountable and doing what's right for kids. And you know that it impacts one person in a family terribly, but you also can't have it affect negatively 150 kids that person is in contact with, right? And so that ultimately is what kind of helps you make that decision moving forward. Is this impacts the number of kids negatively? We've got to get this taken care of and clean it up. So, you guys got any questions? Rich tired, ready for lunch or what?
Is there a difference with your board from Boone Central being a more of a rural community than to Waverly? What have you done differently?
Great question. Yeah, you know, my perception has been, you know, at Waverly, I've been there 11 months, going on almost a year, I guess, and they've left me alone to the point where you're like, God, is everything all right here? And I barely hear from the board, right? And our board president had told me, Corey, we're going to leave you alone, let you do your job. If there's anything major, we'll let you know. So I appreciate that. As long as, you know, I still have a job, you know, so, you know. But they approved the contract and everything, so I think I'm coming back. So Boone Central was a little different, and I don't know if that's, we had one board member there who was trying to solve people's problems, right? So they'd come in and they'd say, hey, you heard this, and I hadn't gotten a phone call on it from there. So it's that thing of, is it your problem or is it truly their problem? If it's truly their problem, they'll communicate with us, right? So let's not create a problem that's not there. That's probably one of the bigger things that I see board members do that is kind of out of their limit. So we had more of that there. I think we also had a little bit more of, we had people that were too involved, and we had some board members that were detached, right? So you kind of had the extremes, and so we would bring in, you know, people to come in and talk to us about board roles, board responsibilities, and the relationship between the superintendent and the board. And one of the things we had a board member down there that was kind of anti-athletics and anti-facilities based on athletics, and to me, I'm going, God, what? Man, that's our bread and I love sports. Who doesn't love sports, right? Well, you start to kind of learn it's okay to have that perspective on your board, right? We can't all six be the same, you know, we can't all six love the same things, and our focus can't be the same. So, you know, you start to understand, you start to accept, hey, there are differences here, and those differences are okay, you know. The Waverly board, you know, we have a couple of new board members that I think are still trying to learn what being a board member is. We have a lot of experience on that board. So when something seems like mild crisis, they've been there long enough to go, I understand, you know, I understand. We had an issue, you know, the walkout issue back in March that kind of hit some school districts, you know, in this area and, well, all over the place. We had a walkout at our high school. I think it was handled very professionally by our administrators and by our staff. And I'm sure our board got some phone calls on that, but I think one of the things that we did well was our high school principal communicated to our board prior to any of this happening, right? Our board knew what was going on. So when they get a phone call from some parent upset, they can say, listen, I know what's going on here. We were told about it, we understand it. And it ended up turning out to be, I think, a positive thing in our district. Now, in some districts, those were looked at differently, you know. They were looked at negatively in some districts. I think it came across well in our district. And once it was over, we didn't hear another thing about it because I think the work was done up front, you know. But I think that being a board member is not an easy job, you know. People assume, I think they get on a board, they're gonna make all these changes, and this teacher wronged my kid years ago, and it doesn't work like that. You're one of 6, or you're one of 9, or you're one of 7. You don't have majority power, you know, and so, but I think you're constantly gauging where your board is with things, you know, where are people's knowledge levels on certain things. I feel like as a superintendent, it's my job to give them that knowledge, or to give them what they need to be able to make decisions for the best of the district, you know?
How do you get them to understand that they're not a board member until they're in a board meeting?
Well.
I mean, they're not, just because they're on the street doesn't mean they're a board member.
True.